Well, welcome everybody to Undisputed with Clay and Brenton. This is our NASCAR talk show. We've been running this for a couple of weeks now in the 2019 season. I apologize to any viewers from last week with the audio issues. I don't know really what happened, but I'm hoping I solved them this week. I made sure I checked some different levels on different things. So hopefully this week we've got a whole better show for you. We've got a bunch of different technical issues ironed out. And we're going to discuss picks for Atlanta and, well, what was up with Sunday, Clay? What do you think was up with that?
Well, first, we already made our picks for Atlanta. We're making our picks for Vegas.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's right. Vegas. Good call. Atlanta was on my head, and I don't. You can explain why. So.
Well, all right. So there was a lot of anticipation going into Atlanta because it was the debut of the new Aero package. I think there was a lot of, again, anticipation, a lot of excitement for it, and see what it could do. And I think a lot of people, myself included, were probably somewhat disappointed at how similar it was to every other year in Atlanta.
Yeah.
Yep. Kevin Harvick show. Keselowski's same faces there, which maybe it isn't a testament to how crappy the Aero package was, but maybe just how good those drivers are. I don't know.
Sure.
I did definitely see a difference in the racing. It was a lot more spread out. There was very little braking in the corners. I mean, they were pretty much wide open for a lot of the day. They might have let off the gas, but for the most part, they were wide open. So the racing was a little more exciting. I will give them that. But unfortunately, the outcome was still about the same as what we've been seeing.
Sure.
Again, disappointed for Kyle Larson and the bad luck that he always experiences. And then, there at the end, why NASCAR reverted back to the old lap car rules for this past week at Atlanta, I do not know. Again, I was not a fan of that. Never liked it back in the day.
Sure.
I really wish they hadn't done that, because I think it kind of robbed Martin Truex of his opportunity to run down Brad Keselowski. And I know Kyle Larson mentioned in a podcast or interview earlier this week that regardless of the position, whether you're only lap, 2 laps, 5 laps down, they're paid to race and they should race, which I understand that to an extent. But if you're 18th a lap down and there's 5 laps left in a race, get out of the way. There's absolutely no chance you're going to win that. And by having the second place car pass you when you're 18th a lap down, that doesn't hurt or improve your position at all by racing him. So just let him go. Right. You're basically altering the outcome of the race. And something that bothered me is that Martin Truex was a Toyota and he was held up by a Ford, and which also let a Ford run away with the win. And I don't know what it is about manufacturers this year, but it's like there's quite a strong pack in the Ford gang.
Yeah.
So some of these drivers would give up a win just to get a Ford in victory lane, which is kind of strange. I thought it was every man for himself, but the amount of teamwork that we see in NASCAR and have seen over the last few years is impressive. It's a very team-oriented sport, but it's almost ruining the sport where, it's all about who's paying who, who has this alliance, who has that alliance, and it's really taking away from the fun and the individual, anticipation in each driver, because if Joey Logano gets the lead and Brad Keselowski is second, Brad's going to win. So, although I will say, Joey Logano was leading Sunday and Brad was faster than him, and he gave him one heck of a shove there at the end to get him out of the way. I don't know if you saw that or not.
Yeah.
It was it's pretty interesting. So, again, overall, it was a decent race. It was okay. I still don't understand what happened there at the end. I still think it's too early to judge the aero package quite yet. We still have a lot of races to go this year, and I think we could overall see an improvement in the racing. But
sure,
on a scale of 1 to 10, or better yet, a grade for the racing in Atlanta last week, I would give it a B-.
Sure. And that makes a lot of sense, because it is, whatever they did with the rules package doesn't bode well. I mean, clearly the headlines for every different media outlet were, lapped cars, everything. And we will probably put that in the description for this video and maybe even the title. But, whatever they did and their reasoning behind that, maybe they were thinking that the race was too dull, so they reverted back to some old rules. I don't really know anybody who could explain that very well. I don't know if anybody wants to explain it. I think some of different podcasts and different things that I've listened to as well have stated that, a lot of the media coverage is starting to become very biased towards broadcasting NASCAR and explaining what's going on to people and just trying to hype it up rather than actually explain what's going on. So
right.
It's an interesting dynamic from that perspective, and from a journalistic background, it's very unique to see. I won't say that I don't like drivers in the booth, but there's a reason why they were drivers, and there's a reason why people go to school to be journalists, and sometimes those careers, they can you can parallel different things and you can crisscross things, but I think it'd be nice to see some more journalistic talent in the booth, and as opposed to people who are invested in team ownership, have very huge connected ties to different drivers and different owners, and actually get kind of out of the spectrum of the sport. But I guess that's kind of in essence what social media does. I mean, that's what allows us to do this show, where we can kind of bring these topics up freely rather than, under the big thumb of NASCAR and some of what those drivers who are in the booth kind of have the reins in their mouth, so to speak, on topics like this.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because I think Fox Sports used to have a really, really good dynamic back in the day when they first started broadcasting NASCAR, one that worked really well. They had Mike Joy, who is the journalist. He's the commentator. They had Jeff Hammond, the crew chief, and they had Darrell Waltrip, the driver.
Yeah.
And those three worked really well together. And when I look back at all the years of NASCAR broadcasting, I think of Mike Joy, I think of Alan Beswick, I think Dr. Jerry Punch, all these guys that were really good at calling races, and they were all, journalism professionals. So I think you have a good point there. The drivers do know a lot, but again, sometimes they're a little too invested in the sport. They're probably afraid to say things like the stupid, NASCAR cautions at the end that have,
right.
NASCAR is nothing for NASCAR to throw a caution for, a piece of cling wrap that's laying on the track. Yeah. And it totally screws up the outcome of the race. I'm not going to say it doesn't change things up, maybe make it a little more exciting, but it's still not fair to the guy that's been leading for the last 30 laps. And then loses the race on a green and white checkered because of an unnecessary caution. And I think a good example of maybe a little bias in the booth was Jeff Gordon back at Daytona. I mean, he didn't really take up for Jimmy, but he didn't really run him down either. He just really seemed to stay away from the issue and, kind of blame it on Jimmy's car more so than Jimmy. And
right.
It's clear that Jeff has a vested interest in Jimmy. I mean, he found him, he mentored him. He's part owner of the car for a while, might still be, I don't know. But, and I mean, he's looking like an heir to the Hendrick throne.
Yes. Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously he's not going to say anything bad about his buddies at Hendrick, which is smart on his part, but
sure,
is that good journalism? I don't really feel as though it is. So.
Sure. Yeah. And that's kind of like obviously an outside of the sport topic, because, you know, only the media can really change that by hiring different people to do things. You know, where these drivers would go other than the booth, I don't know, but they've been paid a lot of money for a very long time to race cars, and maybe they can work their talents elsewhere. I mean, I'm sure some of these drivers could bring back more grassroots racing in you know, local short tracks and stuff like that, rather than moving straight to journalism. But it's just a different type of topic. In regard to what we saw at Atlanta, moving to Vegas this week, do you think that, obviously it's very soon to tell what the aero package is like. We've had 2 different winners, but that's not surprising. We've only had 2 races. But from my perspective, it's almost looking like this year could be very diverse in the amount of winners that we have, just simply based off of who's been running up front, who's been winning poles, who's been winning stages. We haven't really seen a very dominant person. So is it possible, in what you're thinking, do you think that we can see more than 16 winners this year? Because I think it's possible, and I really think NASCAR would be in such a bind, and I would find it absolutely hilarious if we had more than 16 drivers before the playoffs be in a position where they would have to, where NASCAR would be scrambling to figure out what to do. What do you think?
Is it something I want to see? Yes. Is it something that I think we'll see? No.
Okay.
And unfortunately, I can't really answer that question yet. I mean, we had Daytona, which is a total crapshoot.
Sure.
And then we've had Atlanta. That's it. So once we see what happens at Vegas, and once we see what happens at Phoenix, and once we see what happens at California, we'll start to see a trend. Honestly, it was an improvement, but I didn't see a big enough change in Atlanta to justify it being a totally different year.
Okay.
I mean, all our same big names were still there at the front. So I hope you're right. I definitely hope I'm wrong on that. But I don't know. It just seems like the same 5, 6, maybe 7 guys are always there at the front. So,
sure.
So we'll see. I do think we'll see a little bit more diversity in the winner's circle this year, but more than 16, doubtful.
Okay.
And I guess if it did go beyond 16, I guess it would be whoever has more points would make it in.
Sure. Right.
That's a good point. I have no idea how they'd work that.
Yeah, and it would just be interesting to find that out, because I would imagine it would go based on points, but then they would kind of have to throw their whole rule book out the window. One thing we should look into in the future is trying to figure out how to get the rule book from NASCAR. Like, I don't know if that's online, but we should totally try to figure that out. So
yeah, you're right. One thing about the aero package show at Las Vegas that I'm interested to see that we didn't see last week at Atlanta is Las Vegas is one of the tracks that they tested this package at the off season.
Oh yeah.
And I saw some footage from the test sessions, and they were running in packs like they do at Daytona and Talladega. They were racing totally different at Las Vegas than we saw at Atlanta this past weekend. So
interesting. Okay.
The big question for me going into this weekend is, was that just a show, or a true test at the testing session? Or is that really how they're going to drive at the race itself this weekend? So it'll be interesting to see how that.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up, because that is a very exciting thing to note, because we have seen progress in that, or we've seen that sport test there. So
I like the looks of what I saw in practice. So I hope it's similar this weekend.
Sure. So, going into Vegas, we've got picks. We've obviously talked before the show. This is what we do, just so the audience knows. We do hash out things before the show starts, so we make some picks and everything before we get rolling in this. And this is always fun. So, Clay, what do you think? What have you got for pole in Vegas?
So the pole in Vegas, looking at pole position history over the last year, and then starting positions at Vegas in particular over the last couple of years. It pains me to say this, he's always there, and I get really tired of the closer. But I think you're going to see Kevin Harvick take the pole on, I guess it's Friday evening at Las Vegas. Who you got for pole?
Sure. Okay. And I can understand. I get that. Like, that makes a ton of sense, because I wouldn't want to see it either, but I can understand that logic. I'm picking with this week, not based on bias, because again, he's my favorite driver, but he's hometown there. He knows that track well. He's very dominant. I'm going to say Kyle wins the pole on this one.
He was my initial pick, but my concern with Kyle is that he always comes into Vegas as the favorite. And if you look back at, the history, statistically speaking,
sure,
Kyle does really well in the truck and even in the Xfinity Series at Vegas. But if you look at his win history in the Cup Series, it's not as impressive. I think he might get a little blown out of proportion here because he's the hometown boy.
Sure, and that's perfectly fair. It's going to be hit or miss. I think he's got a bit of a drive, especially coming into Daytona and coming in second, coming in fighting from the rear all the way to sixth at Atlanta. Even though he qualified way better than that, he bumped the wall. He's got a bit of a hunger, so it's just kind of what I thought. But I agree, though. I agree he doesn't have the best history with this. So
real quick, refresh my memory. Was it Las Vegas of last year or 2 years ago that him and Logano got in a fight?
I think it was 2 years ago.
Was it 2 years ago?
I think it was 2 years ago. Yeah, I think everybody's played it pretty cool last year.
Because he wasn't far from winning that race.
Right.
When he got dumped. Right.
And we know he's won before because he's won at every track except the Daytona 500. So it's doable.
It's doable. It's definitely doable. Not much is changing for stage one. I see Kevin taking the lead and keeping the lead for a while. I see him taking stage one as well.
Okay.
Kevin Harvick, stage one.
All right. I'm going to go on a little bit of a momentum roll. I'm picking Brad Keselowski this week for stage one. He obviously won Atlanta. He wasn't feeling well. I think he's going to capitalize on some momentum. He's got a Ford. I wouldn't say Fords have been dominant, but they haven't. I mean, it's been a complete wild card. We've only had 2 races. So I'm going to say Brad wins stage one.
Gotcha. Going into stage 2 for me, I see your guy picking up a little speed in the middle parts of the race. I got Kyle Busch taking stage 2.
Okay. All right. So it's funny because it's the other Busch that I picked. I picked Kurt. He's got a lot of momentum. I think he hasn't really been in the hunt for a lot of different things, but it's also his home track. I know he knows that well. I believe he's won there before. I could be wrong, but I believe he has. So I think Kurt's going to take stage 2 on this one. I think that he's got some bite that I think he's going to be able to capitalize on.
It's interesting. For my winner pick, I've got a little logic behind this. In 2017 at Las Vegas, he finished second. In 2018 at Las Vegas, he finished third. He started well in both of those starts. He did well at the Daytona 500, all things considered, considering how many times he ran.
Yeah.
At Atlanta, he did really well. Had some bad luck. He seemed to be really well at running the high line per usual. I think you're going to see a similar style of racing at Las Vegas. The high line is going to be fast. I hope Kyle Larson finds some redemption this weekend.
Okay. That's a solid pick. I think that he is a great pick for that. If he can hold it together, which I know that he struggles with holding the equipment together in long term, but if he can and he stays out of that, that is a solid pick for a win. Well, and that would be great to see him win.
The thing with Kyle is that he either does good in the early parts of the race and then fades, or he comes to life at the end of the race. He's not a dominator, so I don't see him being a pole winner, and I don't see him being really a threat at all in stage 1, and probably not much of one in stage 2. Maybe he'll be running like top 5 by the end of stage 2. But they'll get the car tuned up, and he'll march his way around the high side to the lead in the very late stages of the race.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's a great pick. So high side's funny because my pick for winner is sadly it's another Kyle, but it's going to be my Kyle. I think he's going to run high line as well because he ran it in Atlanta. It was working for him until he clipped the wall. I'm saying KB wins on this one. I don't know how well he'll do the rest of the season. I don't even know if he will win. Like, I'm just picking him because I know that he has like that fire and hunger to try and do it. But obviously, as we already hashed, it's going to be a tough one. So statistically, it's not the best, but it's a good shot. So.
I'm going to go out on a limb here and make an extra bold prediction. I have Kyle Busch winning stage 2. You have Kyle Busch as the winner of the race. I think it's going to be the Kyle and Kyle show coming down to the other race. I think both of our picks are going to be close this weekend.
And that'll be fun because we know that both of those guys they're both aggressive, and we've never really seen them really go at it. Like, there's been opportunities, but nobody knows what the other one's going to do. I think seeing those two come down to the end would be really, really entertaining.
Well, I don't remember what track it was last year. For some reason, Kansas is sticking in my head, but I don't think it was there. But Kyle Larson kind of pulled a really, really deep slide job on Kyle on the last lap, and Kyle spun him out. Do you remember that?
I do.
That's probably the most battling we've ever seen them do so far.
I'm also wondering, it was either Kansas might be right. It might have been, I don't know. In my brain, I think Chicago, but I don't think that was it.
Chicago sounds right too. It was one of those like.
Yeah, it was a Midwestern track for sure.
Right. So
that's true.
Kevin Harvick pole. Kevin Harvick stage 1, stage 2. Kyle Busch taking the checkers and winning is Kyle Larson. My long shot. He's really not that terribly hard to believe as a winner. When he left Gibbs last year, I thought he was pretty much going to be making a downgrade in his career, but he's actually driven with more speed and drive so far in the first 2 races than he did all year last year. So I think with Stuart Haas now, he might be at his best opportunity ever to find himself in victory lane. So my long shot winner for Sunday is Daniel Suarez.
That is awesome. That is actually really good logic. You're right. He's been a sleeper because he has been running really well, and nobody's really talked about him. And I really think he could surprise it.
He's been secretively strong. I mean, nobody really talked much about him because when he left Gibbs, it was kind of like, where's Suarez going to go? Nobody really cares because he's probably not even going to last another year. You watch out for him. He's got that Stuart Haas power. I've always thought he was a good driver. I think a lot of people, not a lot of people, but NASCAR wanted to see him, perform well.
Sure.
Mainly for their diversity purposes because he's from Monterrey, Mexico. That has nothing to do with it. He is a good driver. I don't care what country he's from. I think it's great. He's from Mexico. I think it's rather intriguing to hear somebody give an interview that doesn't talk like Dale Earnhardt Jr., but actually talks like he's from Mexico.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's refreshing to me. I think it broadens the sport, and it's good for the sport to make it a little more diverse. So all that aside, don't care where they're from. I want to see a good racer. I think Daniel is a good racer. And he's got that Stuart Haas power. So I don't think we've seen the last of Suarez yet.
I like that. If if Stuart Haas is known for one thing, it's taking somebody who has been pretty much a nobody and making them amazing. Case in point, Eric Almirola. Like, he was not going really anywhere. So
Clint Boyer, Eric Almirola, even Kevin Harvick. Harvick had gotten stale.
Yeah.
He got really stale in the 29. So
he did. And then they move over to Stuart Haas, and it's just, all right, they've got something going on there. That is fantastic.
Look at Harvick. First year with Stuart Haas championship.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's nuts. So
it's crazy. Who you got for a long shot, Brenton?
I've got so it's funny because you've put Daniel Suarez. I've got the former teammate of Daniel Suarez, part of the JGR stable that I think just Toyota is going to kind of do pretty well this weekend. It's just my take on it. I've got Eric Jones. He's also been up there. He's been running decent. If he can catch a break, I think he has the potential to do it. Mm-hmm. So
another solid driver that he's a sleeper. He's there every week. Unfortunately, doesn't find victory lane as often as I think he deserves to.
Sure.
A good driver. Seems like a heck of a good, nice guy. I do like Eric a lot. So, good pick.
Thanks. So, there we've got it, folks. We've got our pick for Vegas this week. This should be a fun one. Obviously, it snowed in Vegas a couple weeks ago, so
wow.
I highly doubt that. Yeah, it was. I've got some relatives that are out there, and they were taking pictures of snow on the golf course. I was like, oh my goodness, this is nuts. So clearly, the Western Swing is not as far west and warm as it needs to be sometimes, but I think the weather will be fine. I think in 2 weeks it's fine.
I'm looking forward to that Western Swing. I think this new aero package is going to be really exciting at California because California is already a fast and really wide track that it's good for 5-6 wide racing.
Yeah.
So I could see California maybe being the next mini Talladega.
I was going to say it's going to probably end up being like a super speedway almost, where you're going to have the 4 or 5 wide. Hopefully, you don't have the amount of wrecks and red flags, but when you race 4 or 5, it's bound to happen. So
it's still exciting.
I agree. I'm just saying, like, a lot of people lately have been complaining. I'm not. That's fine with me. I mean, I don't care. It's more time for NASCAR. So
Paramount, they got deep pockets.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. We've got our picks for Vegas this week. That was Undisputed for this week. Hopefully next week we might have some surprises in store for you. We've been working on some different things, and we're excited to try them out. So, thank you so much for watching. Let us know what you think in the comments. If you enjoy NASCAR as much as Clay and I do, we'd love to hear from you. We're looking for more social interaction on NASCAR because we're very passionate about it. So thanks a lot, and we'll see you next episode.